Hey everybody, welcome to Living the Line. Thanks for joining us. Today, I've taken some time out to interview a comic artist that had come out in the last, at least in my awareness, in the last year or two. I've got two really lovely books by Anna Margarida Matos. Did I pronounce your name
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
That have really blown my mind in like the last year of my reading, at least. Grapefruit as part of the mini kush, and then Anna, is this your first like major release? Not today?
Yeah, yeah. That's the translation for the Portuguese version. Yeah.
Okay. And so I recently got this as well and have been very blown away by Anna's both thinking, because the work is very philosophical, and then also just formally, you're developing a comics language that I don't think I've seen exactly before. So I'm really happy to welcome to the show Anna Margarita Matos, someone that I think is pushing the boundaries of the forefront of comics and the avant-garde in a very intelligent way. So thanks for joining us. I'm really excited to have you here.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah, great.
So to get started, because I know in reading Not Today, a lot of this is recording both time during COVID lockdown, but also recording the end of your time in school for art, it sounded like. So if you could talk more about just yeah, your training, why you got into the arts, that kind of thing, and then we'll go from there. That would be great.
So, why did I get into arts?
Yeah, like your time in art school, how that synced up with
Mm.
comics. Were you going to art school intending to
Okay,
do
so
comics? Was that something you found along the way? Just anything along those lines would be great to learn.
okay. So first and foremost, I did high school specific in art school in graphic design. So I did my high school in a specialized art public high school, and it's only arts. So in the first year you try everything, and then you pick one and you continue the 2 years that follows. So I did graphic design, and so I was used to doing objects and specifically books, and that was my thing for some years. But I was also interested in things like ceramics, which didn't properly fit in. And I was learning silk screening, printing, and photography at the same time. So it was all at once when I was a teenager, was great. And then I decided that I was going to move on to fine arts in Lisbon. And I applied for a degree in, it was multimedia, it was called, but then I got into painting. And I was like,
Okay.
okay, let's let's see. Yeah, let's see, because I'm used to doing printing and books and photography, and now I have to do somehow painting. And I quickly understood that it was not only the painting with the brush, it was a more broader concept where you could do visual arts. And so I started developing these images and this text, and I would always write and I would always draw, but I would never combine them in the canvas. So I had some issues with the part of the painting more academic, but at the same time it was visual art. So it was like, okay, we'll get this on. Okay, okay. And then I actually I've never been a person that was reading that much. So neither comics, neither books. Only if it was not pushed, but it was a bit like I'm not very interested in having my free time. Only reading books.
Hmm.
But at this time, I was dating this guy, and he was like, "Look, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're doing text, you're doing image, and somehow you have a narrative that connects them. Do you know? Have you thought about it as comics? No, 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 comics. No, I don't. Spider-Man, like the stereotypical thinking process. I was like, no, like, I don't want to do Spider-Man. Like, what do you mean? And
Yeah.
so it was like a deconstruction process, right? In that moment. And I was like, okay, hang on. I'm already doing visual arts. I'm already like trying new things. Why not give this comic thing a shot? And then he started showing me more. I guess less commercial and less stereotypical comic books, and more driven narrative type of book and books. And I was like, okay, I can work with this. Like my work depends and always relies on a narrative. How can I don't know, spin it and then put it a bit of me? And that's how I got into comics, but always not calling it comics. I was just like visual narratives because I visual arts. You know, it was just
Yeah.
like a degree in visual arts. I'll do visual narratives. See,
Yeah.
that's it.
Did that make it easier to like sell it during school as activities? Like the faculty were more accepting of like I'm working in
Yeah.
narrative art. That's silly.
Yeah, also because academy here, like the fine arts, not here, I guess everywhere, it's still very painting, sculpture. You know, it's very within boxes, and then you have
Yeah.
comics, and it's just like more over there, more over there. And still to this day, I have a lot of friends still at fine arts, and now I see more people doing zines, and now I see more people approaching narratives, and it's very interesting, but always with a bit of like, am I pushing the boundary here, am I not? But it's good because then you have all the freedom, because you're already like, I'm already outside the box, so I can do whatever. And that's what I felt. But yeah, my speech had to be a bit different in terms of approaching my professors, of like, oh,
Mm,
this is a narrative nonetheless, but the translation of it, it's a bit like comics, you know, and
yeah.
and the conversation would start. Yeah.
Well, one thing that I found going through like getting a BFA and an MFA in the fine arts and spending 10 to 15 years painting, not like comics is what I wanted to do from the beginning, and then I went this whole art school route, is that yeah, it didn't fit, like they don't consider it a medium. It's like
Yeah.
something that you do with drawing, something that you could do with painting. It's not its own thing with its own set of rules, and I don't feel like that had caught on. But I also personally got, for me, I got to the point where I felt like painting and all these things, I still needed sequence. They needed to be on the wall in a certain way or something. And then
Hmm.
I had an experience where I went and saw some R. Crumb stuff in person at a gallery, and I watched people. It was his book of Genesis, and there's these pages with all the dialogue and the whole 300 some odd page book, and people are in the gallery like going and reading page by page. I thought this is fucking crazy. Like just go buy the
Yeah.
book. Like this isn't meant to be on the wall. And
Yeah.
and I realized that the things I wanted to say couldn't be said in one or two images. I need 80 pages
Yeah.
or 200 or whatever. So it sounds like you
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
bumping up against some of those same like venue constraints of the typical fine arts venue.
Yeah. Also, because then, okay, then also I was having this. It was installation. The class was installation, and so I had two professors, and both of them were painters, but in a very different set of context. So one is was a bit more abstract, and the other was a bit more what I call painting in space. So he would go and converge a bit of a, it was sculpture and painting at the same time. He would have things that are painted that then deconstruct and open into a sculpture. So it was a bit of a mess, but it was great. A mess in a good sense, because it was great. Suddenly I was talking about space and how to curate and how to do this dialogue between my work in the space that I would call as a paper or a zine or a book.
Hmm.
And that I was already comfortable with doing a book, with doing an object, with doing this thing I could deliver to a person and have a bit of me, and then having my narratives inside. So it was a meeting point in my second year of the degree, which was before COVID.
And can you say when, like when you first started, when that boyfriend of yours introduced you to comics, like what, how long ago was that where this became a part of your art language, this medium?
Okay, so I finished my degree in 2021, and my degree is 4 years, so
Okay.
we just have to do the math there. 20,
Oh,
more or less, like we're more or less it was like 18, 19. It depended also the window, because the process of also for me, that deconstructing of stereotypical comic and finding out, since I was not an avid reader, finding out the good books, the books that interested me and that lead me to something. um it was also a process, and from also letting myself go in this, okay, I'm still in degree in the degree of painting, so I was still being confronted with painting or not painting, and then doing comics, and but these are not comics, but these are visual narratives. So it's like, I guess it's a process, but I would say, I 18, 19, 20. Yeah, yeah, something like
19,
this.
20. Okay.
Yeah.
And so when you were in a program where you were like, I'm a painting major, and they were trying to hold you to that, like they were being like,
Fifty-fifty.
you're using a pencil now, like get out of here.
It was 50-50. So in the beginning, it was very nice, and it was like, oh, you can do everything. But then teachers change, and so I got this guy, and he was already in fine arts for like, I don't know, 20 years, and he was a painter for like 30 years. It was his life. And then I got there, and I was doing mostly black and white and mostly drawing, and he was like, no, sorry, this is not painting. Like, you should go grab a bucket of blue, red, and just the paintbrush, and then you just paint. And I was like, but I don't, this is not this is not pleasure for me, sorry sir, no. And he was like, no, this is not painting, then this is painted drawings. He would call it painted drawings. And I was like, okay, sorry.
It's too bad you ran
So
into that, because I feel like the forefront of our education is about the idea. Like when I was in graduate school, I was in the painting program, but any number of my peers there probably spent the majority of their time making video art or something, because we
mm,
came in as like exploring a concept and we were doing that through painting, but then if the concept led us to video work, then
whatever,
we would do
yeah.
yeah, like they would push me like, quit painting so much, go
Hmm.
do a performance, try something
Yeah,
new.
that's what happened to me. So I had that teacher on like second year of the degree, and then the third year I had this very, I to this day I still love him and see him and cherish him, because now he has become my friend, teacher. That he was,
Hmm.
it was at the same time I was also working at the same time I was doing my degree. I would work in my vacation, and then I would have degree doing my classes. And then I was like, okay, enough of this. Maybe I should try and do some comic or whatever they call it. Let me just see what's this about. I was already reading books and comic books, and I was like, okay, I found this course, and I was doing degree, working, and then afterwards I was going to this comic book course, intensive 1 month
Oh,
in Lisbon.
okay.
And then so I started, I always have my notebooks, and so I started just recording every day. And always my work has been always autobiographical,
Hmm.
and so I was always doing this sorts of, it was a questions like, okay, so now name 5 things that you saw in your day, 5 things that you heard, 5 things. And then I would grab those, and at the time Google Photos was unlimited, so I was taking tons of pictures, like tons of pictures, like everything that shines, that sparks my interest, got it. So I was doing this like a crazy person, and it was amazing, because then I was starting doing pages for this course. And in the end, the girl called me and said like, look, do you want to perhaps do a zine? I was like, well, what do you mean a zine? Like, yeah, me and my boyfriend, we're doing this thing with emerging artists, and we really like your pages, and I feel like you could put up like a 17, not 17, 16 pages, so we can do a fanzine. I was like, okay, I have some material for that. But still, to that point, I was a bit in denial. I was just like, I'm doing drawings and text still, not, this is not a zine. And so that's when I started. And also it was at the same time that I had this teacher, and I was showing him my notebooks and then the fanzine, and he was like, "You know what? Why are you avoiding what you like to do? Like, why are you still trying to push the painting in you and then and doing these things and then you do this fanzine and clearly this is what you want?
Yeah.
Stop with this mess." It was just like, stop, focus. And so it comes a time when you have also the great teacher. After
Yeah.
the worst one, it was, yeah,
Yeah, it's important. I have two guys that one of them I call my art dad because he's that mentor figure, but also yeah, then friends afterwards and stuff. That they're both super important to me. So I'm glad you got that because
yeah,
it led you to making some really phenomenal work. So one thing you've mentioned a couple of times that was one of the topics I really want to get into is you've mentioned I had to deconstruct it. And
yeah.
in Grapefruit, when I review this, people can go watch the review. We'll put a little link up
Which
there or
is
something.
great, by the way. I was like, yes, yes, you
uh,
got
th
it.
well, I'm glad I got it. But it's very much about deconstructing the form of comics. So I'm all and then there's your work is just very philosophical in general. So I'm also curious about in your education where were you getting that philosophical and theoretical stuff, or is that just something you're doing on the side? Like, I'm wondering where the interest in that came from. And then for the people who don't really know what we're talking about when we say deconstruction, like giving them, I don't know, the quickest intro you can mean by what you mean by that, because if you don't have that like lit crit history, they may not know what it
Mm.
means.
Okay, so for me, it was always in within my interests, and so autobiographical introspection. I don't know, thinking about time, space, silence, all these concepts that somehow make up my identity. And so when I get to this, oh, well, I don't know why I have this interest. It's just my interest, you know. So I always thought about these things. I always try to depict myself and to get to the bottom of my identity. And identity for me is like the circle of my interest. And then I go
Hmm.
around and I see, okay, how can I depict this? And then I need time, space. And so for all of these things, I have deconstruction, the concept. And where I was getting this information, I don't know, a bit. So obviously, I had philosophy, and so I started with that. I was like, okay, more. We need more specific things. And at some point, I actually applied to a master's in aesthetic and philosophy of the arts. But then I had to stop it because it was the point for me in comics and doing my work is that it brings me pleasure and it brings me some sort of thing. I cannot, I have to keep it up. I have to read. So I try to read the books that I'm interested in, and I try to continue with the things that bring me pleasure. And so deconstructing continuously these concepts where I see myself and where I get to see um, my identity or a glimpse of it is what keeps me going. And so specifically, I have my dearest friends that put up with me, and where I have this these days of emptiness. But I read now. I read a lot of analytical and philosophical books. A lot being the majority of things that I read are like this. But also then I started with anime, Evangelion. You know, you just start into getting to the bots, and it's just like, okay, now this comic is very interesting. That comic, that anime, that manga, and then you just find your peers and your yeah. So it's all coming from this desire of knowing and of deconstructing continuously everything that interests me. Yeah.
It's interesting that you kind of just by following your interests and you've gone so deep into some of the most brain torturing kind of reading you could do, which is great. That's one of the things that like with both of the books, I think the exploration of identity, we'll get into that even more deeply talking about
Hmm.
um not today, but it is that like philosophical approach to the medium that also feels very fresh for me. And hearing you say that there's this thing in the middle that you're going around, that's amazing because that's exactly how I talk about my art too, is I have a center of gravity and then I'm gonna check it out from as many spots in orbit as I can, um, because that's the only way for me to really grapple with something. So that's
Yeah.
interesting. I've never heard anyone else say that. But I've also always said that I think real artists, the people that will keep going no matter what, they have that center of gravity and they know what it is and it bugs them really bad. And
Hmm.
because it bugs them, like if they ever quit being bothered by it, they'll probably quit making art.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's so it's so obvious now. After some years, what I've done, a lot of things. I don't know. Now I have the grapefruit. I have not today, and then I have a couple of things in street burger. I have a couple of fanzines, and now I'm doing more work. And now I feel like I can grasp a little bit of this circle. So that's why I can be a bit more eloquent about it, which is great because now everything that connects all my interests is me, and then
yeah.
I get to, it's like levels, layers of knowledge that somehow I'm apprehending, but it's already, they're already there. It's, I'm just figuring out. But it's so obvious to me sometimes because it's almost like when you're thirsty, you need water, you have to quench that thirst. So you get to the next layer and then you get to the next cup of water. And well, now it's eloquent enough for me to say a water, but
Yeah.
but when I was in painting, not. It's a process, I would assume, for everyone.
Yeah, and for people who like there's plenty of people that watch this channel, plenty of people we interviewed that never been to school. And one of the distinctions I've really been making for myself lately is I feel like a lot of the comics I grew up with, I say those were um comic artists taking their interest to art school. So you get like Chris Ware and Dan Clowes and those guys, they're obsessed with comics first and then they go to art school. But there's a
Hmm.
lot of people like you now that are art school trained first and then they find their way to comics. And so there's this bringing art school to comics. And for people who haven't been through that process, this is kind of like what you just described, I think is the ultimate goal of a general fine arts education is to
Hmm.
get someone to be more eloquent about describing that thing that they orbit around. So
Yeah,
it sounds like you had
discovering.
people who really helped you learn how to articulate those ideas.
And also discovering your language. You were saying at some point you were like, okay, your coworkers were like, ah, video art or doing this it's more or less the same, but then you break the barrier of the stereotype for comics, and it's like, okay, visual narratives. I have narrative, I have image, I have text. Text can be image, image can be text. It's like, okay, I can play with this. It's endable. You not endable. The opposite. It's you can do whatever always in my head with this,
Yeah.
as long
And
as you keep in your interests.
you have the full range of like human meaning production at your disposal
Yeah.
in a comic that you don't necessarily in other languages. So it makes a lot of sense to me. And also something else I experienced was just that yeah, like my engagement with the audience, I just don't trust the engagement level of a gallery experience either. But a book, I know someone's sitting down and taking it
Mm.
serious. And I think I've seen in a lot of the interviews, a lot of people are coming to that idea about comics as a space where you actually I could have my painting in a gallery with 50,000 people walking through it, or I could sell 1,000 at 500 copies of
Copies.
a book, and I feel like I'm making a way bigger impact with the much smaller audience.
Yeah, I also think it's like two, for now it's still two separate groups of people, because, and I'm seeing that because I, since I was in painting and then now I'm a bit more in comics. It's curious because sometimes people within the fine arts field, they don't consider my work fine arts, but then also, at least here in Portugal, the context is very, you have a very strong, we don't have that much tradition within comics,
Hmm.
but people that really liked comics, they like the more the French and the Belgian type of comics. And so whenever they see things like my work, it's like this is also not comics. So
Hmm.
I'm still in the middle, which is great for me in terms of being an artist and being able to explore everything I want. But also it's very stressful if you want to get to the numbers and get to the copies and sell and get to that audience, because then what I saw when when I had my book here, which we are reprinting because it sold out, which was great. And also at the same, yeah, I was like, whoa, okay. Unexpected, not because of the quality, but also because of the audience. You never know who is getting your book and who is actually reading the book from one page to the other and who is getting your message. So it's very, I agree with you, and I see that at the same time it's two separate, for me still two separate groups of people, which sometimes one gets lost and goes to the other, and it's like, "Oh, I actually like," and I got some messages at some point like, I've never uh, read a novel graphic novel, and now I got your book, and I was like, okay, good. I hope you really like it because I loved it making it.
Yeah, we need more of that because you can bring the art school kids, more of them to
Yeah.
comics, and then like kind of this channel. A lot of what I'm hoping to do is the people like bring them closer to
Mm-hmm.
art school stuff, and I think that's where the future of the medium is at. So that's why I'm like I got to
Agree.
talk to artists like this. As we're talking about audience and stuff, one thing I mentioned in the review of Grapefruit is you have in the beginning that there's a thousand people who are sent a part of this comic, and then in chatting for the interview you were like, oh my goodness, once we get all thousand we should host a Zoom. So there's actually each one of these is slightly different from the other in some way. Is that accurate?
No.
No. Okay.
No. It was a bit of a little joke, but also at the same time it gets it's the point of like, okay, I have my own identity and my image of myself, and my comics are a part of me. And so just like my comics, everyone that looks at me and that gets to know me knows, has their own interpretation of my image.
Okay.
So it would be a bit more to that poetic side than to the really, okay, no, it's not different. But I do whenever I sign them, I do the different drawing in each of them just so
Okay.
we can. But it was great. I saw the review. I was like, I wish I could do that with 1,000 copies.
Well, yeah, I was just wondering about like how in the world did you convince them to sit there and
Yeah.
custom make like it's a great idea. But I get it then also you're saying like, hey, each one of your experiences with this is different. So even though the insides are the same, technically it isn't.
It would be
Yeah.
great to have a conversation with everyone, like everyone that gets the not that gets the point. That's my, actually the conclusion is that you have your own interpretation of what I'm doing and your own context, and it would be great to have a conversation with all of the different contexts of this experience, and that's more or less the point in the beginning of the comic.
Yeah, which is very in line with the what I take to be like I don't know. I don't know which authors you're reading and stuff, but there seems to be also a core of like continental era deconstructionist, post-structuralist like philosophers that is largely influential in your work, and along with that comes like this idea of the death of the author in a lot of their writing, and so it makes sense to me that you're turning the lens back on the
Yeah,
audience because that infinite interpretability becomes a thing.
I can actually tell you right now I'm reading three different books, three or four, because this is the thing. Since I was not an avid reader, I still don't have this compromise with. It's not compromise is a fancy word for like I'm not. I don't have that discipline, but compromise. I don't have that compromise with one book. I have a compromise with the pleasure I'm having with these books. So
Mhm.
if in this moment I'm reading this page of the book and I'm not feeling it, but I want to carry on and be. have that moment. So I'm reading one book on Jonas Mekas, with the film guy, and it's like a scrap. It's everything. It's scrap notes and things that he shot and interviews he did. So I can just read one and continue. I'm reading also uh, Antonio Damasio, which is like a neuroscientist, Portuguese neuroscientist,
Okay.
and the book speaks about conscience and like the identity, where it comes from in the mind. And I'm reading something related. I'm reading. I'm starting this, The Power of Words, still. And then someone also, because I'm still delving into the world of comics every day. I'm reading
Oh,
Climbing the Mouse. Yeah.
yeah.
But
That
then
yeah, that
comics for me, I when they're very up my alley, I just devour them. So I have one at a time, and then 3 books of what I called prosa seca, which is like dry words, you know.
but
So
academic
I,
work, like heady
I don't
stuff.
know, just words,
Yeah.
just words.
uh
Basic books, just words.
I do that too. I'll read like 3 or 4 comics, but then I'll have a stack of, yeah, like a philosophy book, and right now I'm reading like Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, and then I have like an art theory book that I kind of take a chapter at a time here and there.
It's just a
So
little
it
treat.
exhausts.
If you're feeling like something like this, you have this. And then, I don't know, you know, I try
Yeah.
to keep it balanced, but at the same time, if one book is very interesting to me on that moment, I just read it all, and and it's good.
And the
So,
majority of it is, it sounds like, still focusing on your core that you're interested in is the philosophical concept of identity. It sounds
yeah.
like, and that is the really the core of the Not Today book, and you go through it in a number of different ways. You throw that idea out there for people who haven't gone and watched the review on it. Not Today is, well, could you explain what's your
So we,
elevator pitch on the book?
no, no. Okay, so Not Today is simply a diary where every day I would write at least 5 lines of my day, and it would go from the most important thing. And it was during COVID, so it would be the most important things in my day, but it could be, oh, today I ate chicken and it felt great. Or today people are dying in this number in this city, and I don't know if I want to do this, or I don't. It goes deep into desires of food, but also desires of knowledge, and also at the same time questioning that knowledge. And then at some point, and so this book came to be. Forget about the pitch, because now I'm already going for the deep dive. This book came to be because I found an agenda, and so where I write my 5 lines, I found the agenda, and I starting, because I do this quite a long time. I just write whatever I find interesting. The same with the Google Photos. The same. So I capture, and I everything it shines, I could save for later. And so I was doing that because specifically within COVID, I felt like I was losing the track of time.
Mm,
And for me, it was like the first time that we had to be at home closed. It was great in the perspective where I was not. I had everything I needed. I could do my own things. I was not commuting, because I was always commuting since high school to my through my degree, and it was almost 2 to 4 hours per day. And so I was not having, that time on the bus, but yes, within my room. And then it all became perfect, because I don't know, if I wanted to draw at 3 a.m., I would do it. If it's just like, if I didn't want to eat this, I wouldn't eat this now. And whatever, I could do anything. And I was very privileged in that sense, because I could think of things like this. And I just took it. I was like, okay, then I can write, then I can do every single thing I want. And so that was the solution for tracking my identity throughout time. It was to write 5 lines, and that's what started the book.
So in the book, there's like these sections down here, which are the journal entries.
Yeah,
Were these images up here made on the same days that these were made, or were these all written and then you went back and
yeah.
because there's
So
almost
I
like
would,
2 or 3 tracks of thought running at the same time in the book.
yeah. So no, what happened was I started doing the agenda, just writing, and then I saw we have a contest here in Portugal, which is, now I'll do some publicity maybe. Toma lá 500 paus e faz uma BD. So that translates word by word. Here you go, 500 euros and do a comic. That's it. And so they give you this prize, and then they publish your book, and you have zero expenses. And so I was like, oh, would be great if I would do something with this, since I have so much time and so much fire. Why not? And so I did some pages. I started gluing, cutting and gluing the words, and that became the focus on the book, also to mismatch, to contextualize things, and to
Hmm.
have those different narratives running at the same time. And I actually won the contest that year, and so it was great because yeah, right. And so I was like, oh my god, now I have to do it now.
Yeah.
Now I have zero excuses. I was already doing this thing where I know my privilege, and now I know what I want to do. So that happened. I started, maybe I was doing, like, if I was writing, let's say March, I was drawing February. So I
Okay.
was doing, it was not like 2 months after, no, it was like 1 month after. So it was still fresh, but at the same time, it was COVID time. So what is fresh at some point? And since I was sleeping and drawing in the same room, and sleeping and drawing in the same room, which also you can tell by the book, it was I was involved within the book almost.
Yeah, and it's interesting because your core is identity, and definitely the core of Not Today is identity. So it's interesting to hear that you're kind of, and you said identity through time, and by working like on that month lag, like I'm just writing and then I'm making art to respond to my writing. You're constantly chasing yourself or having a
Mhm.
dialogue with you a month ago. Was that an
Yeah.
explicit part of that process, or was it instinctive? Like, did you know you were doing that?
No,
Okay.
instinctive. Yeah. That's one of the questions I get asked a lot about this work, because the work talks about a lot of process, the
Hmm.
process of work, and so I was, it's not that I was not conscious, but I was also just winging it. I was just
Hmm.
feeling, okay, now I have this line that connects to that dot, to this dot, and now I know that this will appear again, but also it will appear again because I am me and me is me. And so it's like a conundrum. It's obvious I will talk about, I have, you also, when you do this, the pitch for the prize, you have to give a synopsis, you have to talk a bit about the book, but they are very open-minded. They already knew my fanzines, and I guess what I did, and I don't do that many storyboards. I actually never did one storyboard. What I did was I had everything written, like, okay, I know I will talk about this and this and this and this, but then I am putting everything in the future, and I know I'll be doing everything possible to track it, but it all depends on the future. So it's like I'm a reporter of the future. I will get something very interesting out of it, but for now you just get that I ate chicken, and it felt good.
It's a nice way to work to like this is the yard I'm gonna roam around in and find
Hmm.
stuff in, but I don't know what I'm gonna find till I get there. So to describe it for like the reading experience for the audience, that is you've kind of got your daily entries here, and then there's more pictorial work up here. And a lot of times there will, well, I think this one's supposed to be, no, got to turn this way. Um, and so you can kind of read like this all the way through on its own on this side. And this one in particular is what, like an 11-page mini comic. So you could kind of read that on its own, or you could read, I'm making a mess out of this. Or you could like read these all the way through, or you could like read this and then this and then this and then this. So there's a number, like when you're talking about reader interpretation and stuff, I think readers could go through the book in a number of ways. And the whole thing is it's like a journal during COVID, but there's also this other subplot about this camera that you've got, and you're constantly using the camera as a metaphor for identity as well. And even like the deconstruction, like taking the camera apart, learning how it works, putting it back together. That's kind of like one thematic metaphor that runs through. And then there's kind of also just the story of COVID and like occupying, like, hey, I'm stuck with myself in my room
Yeah,
for a year. Artists, thankfully, are particularly well prepared for that situation, but you're touching on the theme of like a bunch of people having to get to know themselves better because there's
yeah,
nothing else to do.
identity.
And so it's this very, there's at least like 4 or 5 threads running through there that are all focused on the same topic, but they kind of veer off and come back together and veer off and come back together. So for people who haven't read the book, that's kind of the structure of it. Is it's a very intense meditation on identity that uses actual experience, that uses metaphor, both visual and written. Um, yeah, it's an impressive juggling. And at no time in the reading experience do I feel, and this is a problem I think most philosophically minded, myself included, people make, is we'll try and argue for our viewpoint, whereas yours
Hmm.
is you're stumbling through and you don't have a viewpoint yet. You have a general approach to these things that seems to
Yeah.
work for you, but you're pretty much just asking questions. So, um, the majority of like knowing that I'm going to get to talk to you about this, that I just made notes going through about some of the topics you approach in the book. For like an actual review of the book, go watch the book. But if you'll entertain us, I would really like to jump into some real depths of some of the topics you covered here, if that's
Okay.
fine. I'll just make
Yeah.
kind of notes of places in the book that I found philosophically, conceptually, theoretically compelling. Early on in the book, you're talking about the camera and the physiological screen through which we perceive reality. I don't know if you you're looking at me like, yeah, sure, I said that at some point. But I would
See,
just be interested in hearing more about your thoughts on humans as to us human receptors. There's an unbridgeable space between the real and the seen, and the idea that all of our perceptions are filters, I think, is a really compelling thought. So I would just like to hear you talk more about that.
the, yeah, uh, because I was thinking, which something that also comes to mind when I do these things, these diaries and these notes, is I also write them because I want to remember the moments I captured
Mhm.
them. So more or less, if I read a book or see a movie or in something strikes my eye, I just try and grab it, not forever, but that's a bit my intention, although it's a lie. And so these things, what I write about this, it's like it filters also for me, because then I'm always thinking about this perception I have of myself, and within these four walls, I was trying to deconstruct my all of my actions and my glimpses every day. And so it's like, okay, I have a camera, and I see that I'm doing this process on and on and on about on me and my identity. And then I started doing that on objects, because I was trying to do a bit more a neutral reading of life and existence, uh, beyond me, because what's I'm what I'm also interested in this is um, not me, it's always me, but the void that is not having this perception, and so the existence of life continuous. And so right now I'm actually doing this work where I'm again going to this window and this structure you I was also referring there, and I'm setting the things up like life is existing and life continuous, and now me, I'm just the receptor of this short period of time where I can be conscious and where I can open the window. We see things that are running through me, and then I'm applying that to pages. So it's like now I'm trying to get that concept I was talking there about our identity to this surface and this space of pages, and trying to get something out of it. So I think I lost a bit of your question, because then I was like, yes, I was talking already about this, and now I'm working on it again. And I know that this is a filter, and then I know, yes. So I don't
Well,
know.
actually, in answering that question, you kind of brought up one of my other questions, where you're also at some point in the book you're investigating, and I stop me. I just assume you've read a fair amount of philosophy because of the concepts that show up, but it may just be that you're coming to these on your own. But there is a exploration in the book also of the metaphysical status of a book, like what is a
Mhm.
book?
Yeah.
And you kind of just touched on that, and let me see
Mhm.
if I can find that, because I know I put a note on that as well. Yeah, here there's a part where you're saying you're looking at the metaphysical status of stories. A story rests on the underlying assumption that there's a connection between events and times. There's an inevitable change that accompanies us while we move from one event to the next, a cumulative effect of change that is itself qualitative. So you're both describing like the phenomenological aspect of experiencing self as a series of stories that you've stitched together in like a narrative of your life, but then you're also examining like the structure of how the story itself work, which is really interesting. Could you just talk more about, like,
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know, any other further thoughts you've had on that, like as
yeah.
you continue to think about it?
Because, for instance, at that point, I already knew that the book was the agenda. And so, also, one of the characteristics was when the agenda finishes, the book finishes. Because in my mind, positively, I was thinking, I'm not going to die before the book ends, right? So, the book will not end eventually because I'm not dead. And this is one of the things, like a little gag sometimes I do, which is like, so the book doesn't have an end. No, because I actually didn't die. So, so so at that point I was already understanding that this was almost like if I had to transport the the definition of a book, it could be like a YouTube video. And so because I was seeing pages like frames, I was seeing pages as days, and so then I was like, okay, this is the same thing as looking at time in a continuous
Mhm.
way and throughout my life. If I could just stop this moment and open the page and go back when I was 12, or go forward when I am 40. And so I was already thinking about that. How can I translate that experience that we still don't have with our own life and our own identity and time and space to an object? Because I know that now, like now we're speaking about it, but now, the now before I was doing it, and I already could tell that it was a object of the time. And so how could I translate this? And so then I started writing about what for me was this accumulation of matter in this object, so I could somehow get to this conversation that we are having and get to some sort of conclusion. But with most of my questions, I just get to more questions or more interpretations.
That's one of the
So
problems with philosophy, yeah, is it just kind of
but I
gets you
love it.
deeper and deeper. You think you're gonna
Yeah.
like dig your way out eventually, but you just like you can only dig down, yeah.
So
Uh,
that's why when you were saying about the screen, I was like, yeah, actually, I'm doing something with the screen right now, and it's another perspective. I'm within another screen looking at the screen, and it's like, yeah, yeah. I knew at that point when I was writing that I was trying to depict time and space in a different way that I felt it before. Because before, and then you will see it also, the people that still haven't read it, when I speak about time and space at that moment, it was different for me. It was a turning point because I understood that if I was willing and if I was thirsty, I had to quench my thirst in a different way and I had to perceive myself in a different way. And so if I was preaching myself of every second of my existence, I'm a bit different, I had to look at what I was doing in my routines a different way. And so I started writing about it. Yeah, and creating objects like that and whatever I'm doing right now is another another perspective on the same matter, I think.
So you were intentionally trying to re-envision your conception of space and time and your relationship to it. Can you
Yeah.
explain what the point you started from was and kind of where you're at, or what was the like view of space time that you had to rearrange,
Mm.
if you can
See,
remember back?
yeah, I was thinking, uh, so before, it's something that, again, that feeling of cumulative, I'm trying to translate the words in Portuguese, but
Yeah, yeah.
it's a feeling of what you go from one to two to three to four, and it was something that it was very, yeah, very organic and very chronological. And whenever I imagine a chronology at that time, I would imagine going from point A to point B and just being a straight line. And then
Yeah.
at some point, within COVID, since I was in the same room, I guess the line, it became maybe more like a plane or a surface, and then I would imagine myself a bit from above or outside and trying to see whatever I was doing in space and time at the same time. So it was becoming a bit space and time, it was becoming a bit together and one identity, instead of I'm I'm just having time in this space. It was a bit more close together instead of just one line and no preoccupations going from A to B. Now it was more like, okay, now I shift the plane and I see that maybe I am the receptor whenever I have these wills and whenever I have these tools to receive this type of knowledge, but I have to translate and I have to see things differently. And so instead of seeing, because at some point in the book, I go like, okay, so I wake up, instead of going through hours, I go through spaces. And so I go through
Hmm.
this space, I go from the room to the kitchen, to the kitchen to the room to the car. And then I start trying to see things from the space and not the time. And somehow I
Hmm.
understood it was together and not just separate identities. So I'm still going through that, by the
Yeah,
way.
it's a weird thing to rethink because we do just think about this, then this, then this, then this, and this. I think the probably the most mind-blowing thing that's happened for me in that area of thought is another interview we had on the channel. We were talking about progress and thinking about progress in that linear sense of moving forward. And the
Mhm.
the guy that we were talking about, Alexis Deacon, the guy we were talking to, Alexis Deacon, said, "Well, progression can also be expansional.
Mhm.
It can grow out, and then you're not leaving anything behind. You're just accumulating." And so I've been doing that too, having to rethink
Yeah.
like myself, not as just a linear, but like you said, the book does I have access to it all at once, and I think comic creators especially get this we get this thing where we like to think about time and space as something we could move up above because we're used to seeing
Hmm.
like multiple moments at once, and then it's kind of frustrating for us because we can't do that with ourselves except
Yeah.
through memory, which isn't as trustworthy. Um,
Mhm.
we don't ever get that removed view where we can look at our whole life and see it from
Yeah.
above. But it
But it,
sounds
but it
like,
would be great.
yeah, I
It
was
would
gonna
be great.
ask, like, it sounds like you would like that, right?
Yeah, yeah, because at some point on in all of these questions I ask myself, I do feel like I'm not seeing the whole picture still. Me, everyone. Like I do feel like since we're still beings that exist for a very specific short amount of time and space continue to exist without us, I do feel like we don't get the full experience still. It's like I wish I could see my life as a book, and I wish I could go to page one or page last page and just pick one and open the book, and I wish, yeah, but I do feel like maybe that's the full experience, and probably I won't get it in my life.
Nope, probably not.
Probably not.
Apparently, when you
Uh,
die, you get it all at once. Your life flashes
Maybe,
before
yeah.
your
Maybe that's the book of life. And then you die and you're just like, oh, okay, now I can get
yeah.
to.
What do
But
you
yeah,
think you would gain if you could like you obviously desire that pretty intensely. Like what would you hope that that would reveal to you if you had access to that?
I don't know if there's a like already a solid point on doing these. It's just like it must be something different. Like in my head, it's just like, am I seeing this correctly? Am I getting the full? Maybe no. Maybe there's more to it. There's more to us. There's more to me. There's more, and then I get to these lists of things that I probably there's more to life than this and this and this, and so it's like layers of not indecision, but curiosity of other perspectives. I would love to see myself from outside. I would love to just go and just like I would love, and I prefer this metaphor, which is like I would love to just put on your glasses and see your world the way you perceive it, me
Yeah.
included, you know? And
Yeah.
that I really would appreciate the science would do for me.
So you're really this is all just driven by pure like hunger basically. You're just curious and you want to know as much as possible.
For now, yes, I have. Yeah, for now, yes, I have no other intention than pleasure and curiosity. Honestly,
And
it's
that
not
leads
saving the world.
this conversation's going so great though because we're getting to all of my little sticky notes. At the end of the
Eh,
at the end of the book, there's a quote that says, "To create this insatiable urge has come from within oneself. I start noticing that existential and identity questions are worries and curiosity of other artists who are my contemporaries." I don't know if you remember writing that or not, but uh, that left me wondering in that moment when you're writing that on Friday the 7th, don't know what month, but it sounded almost to me like either you're noticing that almost all artists are worried about it, or you're realizing that your interest in this is due to being around other people who
mm,
also share this obsession. I didn't quite know how to take that part because there also seemed to be a sense where at that, which is very much near the end of the book, it almost seems like you're a little bit more willing to let that existential crisis of identity, like, I don't know, that everyone around me is worried about this and maybe I can just let it go. Or are you just noticing that people worried about that tend to, that's why we're here making art because we're kind of sick?
okay, so for me, again, normal. Since I was a kid, like, oh, what's the sound of silence, mom? Things like this, and
Yeah,
you
yeah, me
know,
too.
so yeah, yeah. So, and then I feel like you grow and you meet people that have similar interests, but then um like different processes of a process of doing and I don't know, different levels of curiosity, different levels of thirst. It's like very different things in life that happens to each one of us. And I feel like with COVID, what happened was, and you were saying that, and that's so right, and I got that from the book, which was I was at home again. I was with my questions and my with all of my things. I could do whatever, and then I saw also people crumbling from the TV, as we all saw, and all my friends in their houses and with their things. And then at that moment, like this the structure of identity of society, but also the self, was shaken. And so
Yeah.
then afterwards, and through the end of the book, more or less, it was when we started going out and when we started seeing each other again in life, in person. And then you saw, like, for me it was like, I'm doing a book, and I'm putting everything in the book, and it was great. And then again, my context is very specific. And but then I met people that it was not that great, but it was not that great for the first time. It was like, no, why are you questioning yourself about what's a book and how can I perceive time and space? How are you not thinking about this and this and this? And I feel like at some point, for me, it's so natural to ask these things to me, to myself, and to my routine. Then when I got to my friends and they were asking different things, but at the same time they were meeting some of my questions, it was like, ah, so we do in the end, we do want to know like every piece of ourselves. Like the
Yeah.
the guy that was working in the restaurant, and our country is very driven by tourism, and so the guy that was working in the restaurant and could not open the restaurant was left at home, and also money issues. It was there, but at the same time, we saw people in the news just saying like, "I cannot open my restaurant. I cannot be here. I cannot." Almost like I cannot be myself. Like, give
Yeah.
me my job. Give me my things. And when you take out this society identity of society, what do you get for yourself? Who are you? And I was seeing that in my peers at the time, and the ones that continue to be my peers. And it was more of a, ah, so we're all in this together, it's
Yeah.
it was a moment of like, okay, let's get into the matrix. I don't know.
Well,
It
and
was,
I think the artists are more used to operating in the matrix because
yeah.
I actually, this is something I told people during COVID. I said after 3 weeks everyone's going to lose their mind because everyone was like, "Woo, vacation," and I said,
Mm-hmm.
"No, you all normal people, non-artists,
Yeah.
you have about three because I was privileged enough that up until a couple years ago I worked part-time and that was enough for me to pay my bills. Now
Okay.
I have a full-time job plus some extras, so I don't have any free time, but I had a lot of free time. And so I was kind of always in that state of having to find projects to keep myself busy. And I knew that most people who don't have free time, they have about 3 weeks
Yep.
worth of stuff around the house that they have in their back of their mind to clean up. And then after that,
Yeah.
they're going to have an agenda because they're not used to creating their own agenda. And so I was telling
Yeah.
everyone, people are going to go nuts after a month. And they were like, no, 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 they're
Mm-hmm.
going to enjoy it. And I know after a month,
No, no,
everyone
no.
lost it. And
And
reading
we're
your book
stumbling on that. Yeah.
reminded me that I actually told my partner, Tori, last night, I was like, because I was rereading the book and I said, you know what? Like when I look back on lockdown, I loved it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everyone else is traumatized by it because they had
Yeah.
to spend time with themselves for the first time.
And obviously there's different perspectives of loving it, and being bad and not good, not bad, but not good about it. But it's like most of the times what I was speaking is, it was about that, like it was about this work centered routines that we're used to.
Yeah.
And like I would speak about this with my father. He has like a full-time job for, like, I don't know, more than 10 years in the same place, and then you go up in the company and it's more or less the same thing. And then with COVID, again, not commuting, he was like, I can just go gardening. I can just, like, I can just do this. I can just bake a cake. And it's like, then you discover yourself. So this is
Yeah.
the great part, you discover yourself. But then when you're faced with this set of free time, and you can enjoy it, because, and like you were saying yourself, like you were used to having a part-time and that was enough. But then obviously people were not in the same context, and we have to salvage that part. But when you get to that point and you can really just be left alone with your individual person and interests, and then you strip away the work, and you strip away the need of money and the need of exchanging your time for money, and then time for money and money for time, what do you get? Like, what gives you this thing that drives you throughout your life? What you are thirsty for? What, like? And that's what I saw, like in a couple of friends of mine that were painting with me, were doing this, were picking colors and saying, "I conceptually this and conceptually that," and then what? And so at some point I was like, okay, I can slow down. It's not that bad. Like maybe I'm thinking a bit too much of my screen and my reality.
Yeah.
But now I understand. But now I understand that this is a process for everyone, and it's it's very interesting to see that being depicted in my life, and that's
Well,
part of it.
and artists
Easy.
seem more well equipped for that because that's kind of what we're already, there's something already wrong with us that leads us to do that even when we're already busy with other stuff. Whereas most people are like, I'm tired, I'm gonna watch some TV now. We finish a day and then we come home and we worry about these things. So we're
Yeah.
kind of used to it. And yeah, I think a lot of the world, and I very much worry. This is the other thing I've been saying for a while now because of my experience as an artist. When I start hearing people talk politically about like universal basic income, or when we look at
Mm,
like the way artificial intelligence is going and that driving the UBI conversation, um, I have nothing against, like, that is the ideal world, right? We just everyone gets a free house and everyone has everything they need provided. Like
yeah.
that's
But
the
get ready, yeah.
techno socialist utopia, right? But like
Yeah.
my worry is I don't think that the people who are hoping for this understand the psychological nature of humanity. And no one's talking about, well, what do we do with people? Like everyone hates work, but I think COVID proved what a lot of us artists know is humans need to have work. We need to have
Yeah.
something to do, or else we're going to go nuts and
Mhm.
suicidal and murder. And um,
Yeah.
I think I saw that a lot during COVID, that we need that. And so it sounds like you were seeing that in your friends and stuff who weren't artists, that they needed to find something
Yeah.
new.
Friends and family also, because like I'm my mom and my father both have regular, I would say regular jobs, but it's not regular, but like office jobs. And they studied for those, and they were like, they achieved what they needed to achieve, and they still achieve to these days. But now, specifically my father, because at the time I was living with him, and I would have these conversations with him, uh, obviously, again, since the beginning of since the beginning of my life,
Was he
questioning
happy to have
things.
these My parents always
Yeah,
indulged me, but we're like, oh God, would he stop?
because my parents are very young, and I'm still very young, obviously, but my parents are still also very young, and I feel like also for my father was refreshing to
Okay.
see me seeing him as an individual, like, also you're my father, but also you're just a guy. And it's like for my
Yeah.
mom, again, you're just a girl, and like you had a kid, and okay, it's me, but keeping some perspective, because since we're here in lockdown together, and maybe if I'm questioning my identity, also this goes through my parents and my grandparents. And so it's like it's obvious for me to give them some space as I give myself some space, cut them some slack. And
Yeah.
so I was having that conversation with my father, just like, because they are my biggest supporter, which is great. And so I was doing this book. I won the contest, na na na. And so I was doing the book and having these conversations with my father, and he was loving it. I feel like it was refreshing for both of us,
Good.
just to get, yeah, because I'm talking about. having my book of life and going to page no, no, no. But then I had my father's book of life in front of me, and I could just go like, okay, so when you met mom, how was it? And then going like this. And for him, it was also, I think, a good exercise to deconstruct the notion of work and the notion of time and money. So I don't know where we're going, but same. I was thinking the same as you. Like, we're going forward with these ideas, but we have to think about people and individual and interests and how to maintain this mental health part of the identity. And it's very important to give people space, but also they have to give themselves that space and they have to discover themselves that part. And that's the hard part, I would assume. And
Yeah.
I don't know with your friends if you feel that, but like with me, my friends and at work, whenever we're talking about life and future and hopes and what we want to do, we are all looking for meaning
Yeah.
and pleasure. And when I say pleasure, it's not like it's being feeling fulfilled and feeling successful within myself, not with money or tokens or
Yeah. Yeah.
something something more present. and and we're noticing that with our older coworkers and older friends, whenever we have these conversations, that at the beginning they're it's not denial, even it's like they're not getting our narrative. They're just like, no, you're just bored, you just don't want to work. And we're just like, no, no, we want to do something, but this is not sustainable. I don't want to change my time for money and then go ahead and go on vacation and then come back for more money and then pay a house, uh, and then have kids, and then it's like, what a life.
Yeah, I think there is a real generation gap, and I'm stuck right in the middle of it. I'll be 43 in a couple months. And my mom actually, she's been visiting for the last week. She just left a couple hours ago to go back home to California. And I was trying to explain to her exactly what you're talking about. It was like my students who are coming through who are 18, 19, they went through high school with COVID. They're coming to college through COVID now. All of the adults around them no longer believe in the system. You know,
Yeah.
we're all just kind of there, like, because we have to be, and there's been some stuff going on, like just technological problems with some of my online
Okay.
classes and stuff. And I'm seeing this barrier put up where the majority of the kids just aren't buying into that. Like what
Mm,
I told her is there's that parable about the ant and the grasshopper, and we're always taught to be the ant who stores everything away so when the winter comes you have their food. And so you're always like sacrificing now for this goal later. And
mm-hmm.
that is a great thing, that if you learn how to leverage that as motivation, it's great. But we've been
Yeah.
sold that, and like people your age just aren't buying that anymore. Like sacrificing my time, the payoff
No.
80 years from now ain't gonna be worth it.
Also, because it's like, okay, I work for a company. It's not mine. Nothing is mine. I don't like this possession of neither of you of my time and neither of me of things that are not mine. I don't want
Yeah.
these things for me. And it's like, okay, but what you want to do? For now, I want to do this little comic I'm doing. And for now, I want to do this conversation. And for
Yeah.
now, maybe I don't want to think about, I don't know, these things, and also this social pressure to perform and to again, me being a woman, to have kids and you know marriage and what else, and have houses and have cars and consume, and uh, at some point it's pointless. It's empty. And when you shake that tree, just like COVID did with identity and businesses, what's left, you know?
And you
So
feel like the majority of people in your generation around your age just kind of instinctively understand this by looking at how the world is now?
I don't know, honestly, because I thought I knew, and I thought like my friends, we have pretty much the same, not identity, but the same likings and credentials almost.
Life
But
experience, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But also, I'm talking about what arts and art scene and being in fine arts, and so yeah, people that go through that path are very much connected for very specific reasons,
Yeah.
as to people that go through science or mathematics or you know. So whenever the interest part is when you clash two of those boxes and you merge people and just go like talk, and
Yeah.
so now connect. And for me, I have a day job and I work in communications, and it's like at some point I'm talking to experts because I have to do a leaflet on their numbers, whatever. And for me, I want to know what is your interest and how can I communicate what you love the most about your work the best way possible. And it's not my way, no, it's the best translation possible to get to the most people that would love it. And so it's like when you get through that point and you just say you have a coffee with someone and go like, okay, tell me all about your work. I want to know. And it's like, it's very technical. It's okay. Mine is also very technical at some point for you. But maybe
Yeah.
let's meet in the middle. Maybe let's meet in the middle. It's like when you reviewed Grapefruit, I could see that you got my references. But also at some point, I spoke to someone and I sent them the video. I was like, look, now you can see a different perspective. Because I had conversations with people which was like, yeah, I can see this idea, but they didn't know Yoko Ono, they didn't know deconstruction, they didn't know, and it's interesting nonetheless. And I look at it as that, like when I read my books, when I see Evangelion, and I see like, oh yeah, let me think about Shinji and his mother. But then I have a friend that loved Evangelion for the robots and for the action, and it's like good, great. Let's just keep on moving forward, happy and pleasure above all.
But I
So,
think something like Evangelion that is going to speak at all those different levels, it does
mm,
the narrative there has something of real value in it because you're finding some conceptual meat in it that your
mm,
friend is probably picking up on, but just not as explicitly, right? And
yeah, yeah,
that's something else in as this conversation's been going on. We're talking about identity as a form of narrative and all
yeah.
of these things. It seems like people of your generation have completely deconstructed all of the previous narratives. Like you understand what bullshit it all is. And you're talking about why do I gotta waste my time at work? Like this is a broken story about how the world works. I don't believe it anymore. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well,
so,
some people. Whatever. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry.
well, no, go ahead and say what you're going to say. I'm curious.
Because sometimes people say that it's cyclical, and I can see it. Like it's trauma is cyclical, and then like things like the baby boom, it's obvious. And now we get to us, and it's like I look at my parents, and what do they complain about? Not having
Mhm.
time. And so maybe I will try to have my time and to run away from this narrative of complaining about work. But then you get to the point where like, okay, so if I'm complaining about work, how can I not, like, how can I not participate in this work driven narrative? I cannot. I have to be in society, I have to pay the bills, I have to eat, I have to. And it's like you try to grasp some sort of solution, and to grasp some sort of like community where it all makes sense, but it doesn't. So then you speak to people and it's like, yeah, yeah, actually I, it's not that I'm bored, I just don't see the point of it. Obviously I can do Excel sheets and I can do this, but it's like in the end, what am I gaining with this? Eh,
Yeah. And and I don't mean self-centered or selfish in a negative light.
no,
I
no, no,
just
no.
I just think
Get it.
it's more and more people are like realizing that I need to get something out of this, and we should be I think some people think it's bad. Like I did to me, identity and then like how to manage individual versus a collective are kind of like two of the major things I see our society struggling with now. There's
Mhm.
all of these thoughts in the air about what is identity? How do I form it? Am I forming it? Am I remaking it every second of every day? Is it blank? Am I a blank slate? Am I me
Yeah,
from
yeah, yeah.
jump? We're trying to sort that out. And then that goes along with like these other concerns just about the motivation. Why?
See,
And
yeah.
it seems like more people in your generation are viewing the construction of their identity as their primary job in life or the motivation in
Mm-hmm,
life.
mm-hmm.
Is that
At
kind of
least, at least that's what I get from conversations I have with people. But I also don't know if I have those conversations because I attract these conversations because I
yeah,
have them with them myself. But that's also normal, right? Because well, it's the way you are, and I live in a society, and I speak to people that can be my peers, and then things grow from that. But now, and now we were asking if I know if this is a generational thing. I think so, but then I got out of my fine arts bubble and I start mingling with the comics out
yeah,
in bubble. And in Portugal it's very it's extreme, so you can go very commercial or not a commercial, like it's just like self-publishing and this is what it is, which is great because it leaves margin to do whatever if you have the drive. um and then you see that actually it's not that linear what I thought it was. Like you see that I thought it was generational, and I still think a bit that is. But sometimes I meet different people, even from outside of arts, and it's not that obvious. People sometimes just really like to work, but then maybe they have to stumble. Maybe they just have to stumble on COVID and situation like this to think about these things. And probably I will stumble upon more things in my life to think about more things that I'm still not thinking. So it, for now, it's okay. But I have these conversations a lot with my friends, specifically with women, which is
hmm
also important to create that space. Because when you deconstruct the notions of identity, then you get through all of these how can you say this, with men and women problem and then queer problems. So you have to get through all of those layers, which are very important in identity, or if we are talking about individual identity.
hmm
And so it's very necessary to have this open speech with one another, where you can just throw things, just like when you talk about the thing of like being selfish. What is selfish in the context of today? And I totally get it. Like you just have to have peers and non-peers to throw them things, and then they throw you things, and in the middle you just discover what you're up to and what society is up to. And then you discover that you are society and you're part of it. And so it's like, okay, so now I have to feed the machine also, like
yeah.
and,
But I also think artists are the we should be at the forefront. We should be 20 years ahead in some sense because we're like I think part of our job is to watch culture very closely and then at least that instinctively it feels like that's what a lot of artists do to me. I know that's what I'm doing is I'm just obsessed with popular culture. I'm obsessed with culture in general. And so when I say it's a generational thing, really what I mean is like if all the artists are talking about it, I don't need the regular people to talk about it because that just means that the people are paying attention to the discussion in the general sphere, in the arts and
Mm,
politics and stuff. Because artists are the cultural producers. So whatever we're talking about, like if we're all obsessed about identity, which I agree with you, is one
mhm.
of the things that artists are just way down that hole right now. that is the culture that we live in, because they are working at Disney making the movies and stuff like that. So that's kind
Mhm.
of what I mean about generational, is
So I think
the
yes. I
the
think yeah,
philosophical
honestly.
zeitgeist of the time seems to focused on identity. So then I'm clear, like, or I'm curious, in all of this
Mm,
thought, have you formulated a viewpoint? Because viewpoint's also something you talk a lot about in the book, that
mm,
identity is basically bound up with the idea of I'm seeing the world from here with this experience. Have
sim.
you developed a solid viewpoint on what you think the nature of identity is, or do you still just leave that as I don't know, I'm just spinning around it trying to figure it out?
Well, no. I have no, there's zero solid things when it comes to identity in my point of view. And because that would be contra-intuitive what I'm seeing. Because if I say that I my identity and me, myself, my body, my soul changes within each second that I am existing and within each choice and non-choice I'm making, and that within each person I meet, within my routines, I cannot have a solid thing. No, for now. No, I don't have any solid equation or conclusion, and that's what I feel like I love about it, because then I can go ahead and do self portraits every day and see myself changing throughout the years, and talk with different people and see my opinions change, not change, but also like being sculpted in a different way, in a different manner throughout time and space. And so as much as I would wanted to just go ahead and just like, okay, got it, this is it. Guys, go ahead. We can go vacation somewhere. No. I no, I think it will keep on changing, but also because I'm not a scientist and I don't wanna, and or a mathematician, I don't wanna get to the answer that far. I wanna go through the process, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
someday, like, and someday maybe when I'm dying, then someone can come over and just go like, oh, identity was this and this. Oh, good, great. Or just no, or maybe I die and I see my book of life, and
Yeah.
that was
I I
not
both
not yeah.
I both envy your generation for that, and I feel really bad for your generation for that, because you've been given a lot more, like, it is your thing to construct. Like, you don't have the, well, at least, the people who are paying attention understand that these concepts have been deconstructed, and they understand what that is. And that a lot of it's now then, like, I don't know, we can't give you answers, it's yours to figure out, which comes with a lot of
Okay.
freedom, but it's also a lot more work and a lot more responsibility. And so
Hmm.
I feel very envious of those of you who have grown up seeing the positive of it, where it's like,
Mm.
oh, I have a lot more freedom in this. But I feel really bad because I see a lot of my students not as competent as
Struggling.
someone like you, and then they
Yeah.
just feel totally adrift. And the responsibility of solving their identity actually is a weight that they can't bear, and it's like
Yeah.
it's crushing to them. And I think that when I talk about, like, things this generation is dealing with or thinking about, that's kind of what I mean. And there's people like you who are, you get it, you made it your focus, you're thriving in that environment. And I wonder if we need people, and like, I think people like you need to keep doing the theoretical work that you're doing, but I also wonder if there's people like you that can formulate those things into myths, mythological
Mm.
narratives that can communicate to the general populace more. Because I don't
Mm.
think our old, and I think the people of your generation know that our old stories are broken. They don't work for you guys
Yeah.
anymore.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen too many new things to replace
True.
them. And I think people like you are doing the theoretical work that's going to allow someone else then to come do the mythological work.
Yeah. I hope so. Yeah. And for those, I also have friends that haven't found it, or haven't found themselves, or whatever, haven't found things. And what I do, since I understand that this is something happening outside of me, is I just keep going for coffees with them, and I keep myself, it's just like, I feel like sometimes it's contagious, because sometimes I was, before, maybe I was not, I was very curious since the beginning, as I've been told by my parents. But but I feel like not always I was eloquent enough to express my questions, or not always
Yeah.
was I, um it's not that I was not, it was not, I still haven't had my language and my translation to the world. And so when I found it, and I feel like I still haven't found it completely, it's like I found, I had a glimpse of it. And so now I'm doing what I feel like it's working for me. And maybe in some years I'll be doing, I don't know, like right now I'm also doing video. Right now it's
Hmm.
like it's growing, and I don't feel like it's still a solid thing. It's a path. And for those who haven't found it, I feel like the first step is to understand and to have these conversations like the same we did. And I have tons of friends that do this, what I have, with whom I have these conversations. And then at some point it just, it I don't know, it clicks, it shines, it's, I don't know. I had a teacher in fine arts that said to me, and I feel like maybe this is the part where the artist credential comes, and it's like, that's why you see you got it a bit earlier. It's like he was saying, to be an artist, you almost have to throw yourself in this cliff of,
Hmm.
not knowing, of the unknown, and to just put your faith in something that is not there, and then faith in the not the faith of prophets, neither of that, of those, but in the faith of nothing. And you just have to go, and you just have to have a feeling and chase it. And that, for most of, like, the majority of the society, is not a thing. You just have a job, you study for a job, and you have a job, you go from this hour to this hour, and you get it done, and it's done. And when you say to people that no, maybe you just have to throw yourself to this project that you had a glimpse of, and maybe you will feel fulfilled, it's like, that's too much commitment for something. So keep keep on talking with your students, for sure. That's what I
Yeah.
do with my friends.
You actually got to like the last major topic that I wanted to
Ooh.
talk about in this. You said faith. And I had put a note on this little quote from Saturday, whatever, the 30th. The ego is maybe an artist's most important possession. It comes before knowing how to paint, sculpt, draw, etc. Without an ego, there's no artist. Without faith, there's no art. Faith is a word that's corrupted, contaminated.
Yeah.
So when I say faith, I don't mean prophets and prophecies, but blindly believing in something. That really jumped out at me, along with a number of times you reference like the idea of having a soul. And when
Hmm.
we're talking about these old narratives that have failed, I feel like the core of the like Christian worldview narrative is faith, and
Hmm.
a soul divorceable from the body. And I thought, at least my generation, a lot of the narrative that we rebelled against is the religious worldview. So faith is out the window. And for me, still, soul is like, that doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't have a soul. And so when people are running
Hmm.
around like, who am I? What is my soul? Or like, this
See.
is what I am, but I'm not in the like discussions around trans identity in
Hmm.
specific seem grounded it to me in the idea of a soul almost a lot of the time. And I'm very surprised to see people of your generation coming back around to that language. But then in talking to you, it sounds like, and even reading the book, I got the sense that you're using these terms kind of begrudgingly because it's the closest you can get. Or like you said, the word faith has been abused. So
Hmm.
I was really curious to hear you talk more about what you mean by those two words, especially the idea of a soul. Like, is that something that you and the people you're talking to have in the picture? Because like at least most of people my age from my generation, I think we're pretty skeptical of anything other than
Soulless.
body. Yeah, like there
You're
is like
soulless.
well, and then like how to reconceptualize. Yeah, we are so that's why we're
We're
all a bunch of
soulless.
assholes. Yeah. But it's so funny to me that someone who's younger is like, you have no soul. Because in my mind, I have to process that through the religious worldview of like a
Hmm,
soul
hmm.
that can leave the body and go to heaven. And so I'm curious, like, what does your generation mean by these things? How are you trying to deconstruct and reconstruct those concepts?
Well, first, I don't want to speak for a generation. I'm still grasping things, and so
But you
I don't
can
know
you
what my gen.
but you can talk about like when I was in the place where you were at, like fresh out of grad school, and
Hmm,
you say I'm still talking to my artist friends, you can at least say these are the things that have come up a lot in discussions because that gives a
okay.
sense of like what's in the air, but also you make
Mm-mm-mm.
your own point of view.
So, one thing I want to approach first is the corruption of words. So, because for me it's crucial, because we are all talking about language and I was talking about translation, and so sometimes, and this happened like yesterday when I was talking to some friends, and you get to this perfect word for you and it's not perfect for the other, and
Hmm.
so you have suddenly I understand that I'm looking for the perfect translation, and sometimes it's not words, and sometimes it's words but it's not, they're not pure because they've been corrupted by this type of setting. And it's the same thing, like faith is one of them, million is one of them, because then million is 1 million, it's money, it's already like green, it's so this for me is a very interesting topic because again deconstructing the meaning of things and words, it's very important. But when you get to soul and body, um I've had this come up in some conversations, yes, specifically when I was in my degree, and it was like paint with the soul and na 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 na, and it's like it can be full of, by the way, bullshit, just getting out of it. But at the same time, for me, religion, I'm not, I don't believe. And for me, religion always was a necessity of the human being. And
Hmm.
so it's necessary, okay, so we have to come up with these stories and these narratives, and being within a group we all believe in these stories and these narratives, and then you understand that maybe religion is not only Catholic but also, like, for instance, in Portugal, like football somehow is like soccer,
Yeah.
it's like somehow it gets too much because what you have in a community, you have a group, and you feel like you have the same interests, you go to the same places, you cheer for the same things, and you're all within this narrow field of like this experience, this bubble, and that caters to your needs, and that in a democracy should, it is enough to thrive on itself. And so for me, the question with faith, it always goes to this, where I want to strip the word faith from all of the Inquisition being done things, being, and so that's the first part of it. The soul and the body comes up quite often in painting. In my group and within my peers, not so much the soul, but the body and also the conscious part of our being.
Hmm.
And so it's less of a spiritual thing within the realm of religion and faith, and more a bit on the solid, within the earth and the palpable and seeable eye of, also within then emotion, because then you get too conscious and then you have to deconstruct where it comes from in the brain. And so it's a bit more, if we wish to be scientists, it's a bit more on the scientifical side and trying to grasp some uh, realistic view on it, and not on the prophets and the
Yeah.
on the religion side. but that's also because of our context. Like our country is very rich on Catholic faith,
Yeah.
and we still have a lot of that. But also we have other religions, and also we are a very okay country. So in terms of like, eh, from my point of view, obviously, in terms of coexisting, and so for me, Catholicism and Buddhism and all of the other religions that we have believers in here and in my whereabouts are the same level of valid. And so it's like we coexist with these narratives, and we sometimes we have our own of the conscious mind, and I feel like it's more towards that path that we're going for the soul concept. But I still haven't delved into too much on that, the soul and the body. I'm doing it now a bit for the body, but more in the conscious mind for the book also, because I'm struggling, not struggling, but I'm deconstructing the time and space, and so for that I need the body in space and maybe the conscience in mind, and so I'm trying to align those concepts the most eloquently I can. But so I don't feel like it's more identity than soul that we speak
Hmm.
about, you know. So maybe we're
Yeah.
trying to get away a bit from the religion, but there's still a
But
lot of
it
faith.
still seems to have a bit of dualism baked into it, where there's like the
See.
consciousness is a separate thing from the body. And I'm pretty comfortable, I guess. Like I have a history in philosophy as well, and the mind body problem is one
Mm,
that I feel like is a we've never found a solution to that answer for a good reason, because it's not actually a divide in my mind. It's
yeah.
just two different ways of describing the same thing. And so I always find that very funny that it seems like that divide is, I thought that was like we all kind of had moved past that idea. So it's interesting to see it
See,
come back up
I
as
get
a
it.
topic for a lot of people. But then it also goes with the when I see that come back up and I see, like I said, there's people like you who I think are really we're trying to be Nietzsche's Ubermensch, like for real. Like we realize that like faith is, I don't believe this literally, but it's a useful story, so I'm just gonna accept it anyways. And there's
See.
a lot of responsibility that comes with that, and most people that I
Mm,
know aren't up to bearing that responsibility yet. But
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it seems like you are. And then there's the flip side of that that worries me, like I said, is these people who I think they've come unmoored from their identity, and it's very anxious and stressful for the majority of people because they don't know how to be responsible with it. And one thing that I have always felt like helps me is, and it's funny because I'm not on side mind, body, split, soul, all of that. I'm not a
Mm,
tabula rasa guy. I feel like the blank slate that we start with, every slate has its own
mm-hmm,
variations and tooth in it. And so even though my identity is never fixed in the sense that I can always move around and add and trim, I
mm-hmm,
do feel like it's very important for people to understand that there is still something that's making the choice to trim or cut or add. Like you are at the core of you a person who wants to ask these questions, and there's other people who at the core of them aren't. Um, and so like it's so weird talking to someone like you, because I feel like we're, and then I feel like this about society in general, is a lot of the things that you're saying are like they should be aligned with somehow.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think
yeah.
and
I
some of
get
the
it.
things I'm saying, like the Rubik's cube is almost complete, but it's not quite
See,
twisted. And
I
I,
guess I guess from my perspective, it's like my interest is not still there in the
yeah,
definition of that particular, and so I go a bit along with my interests, and it's like I will get there. It's like
yeah,
it's on my realm of affairs within the identity crisis, you know.
yeah,
It's like I'll get there, because also it's hard because it's still within our identity quite a lot. I don't know about where you live, but here, and it's not something I appreciate So I do have that struggle of like not wanting to let certain narratives to continue,
Yeah.
but it's like also I still don't know how to manage manage them the most efficient way. So
Mhm.
so I'm still observing. So I'm on hold. I'm like, okay, tell me all about your soul and all your beliefs, and then I'll try to digest and see what I think about the situation. But it's like
Yeah.
also it doesn't depend on only on me, because then my narrative is very turned towards me and my identity. But then I also understand that a part of me is others and the otherness itself. So then I have to also flip and see the others as they are, and so I have to
Mhm.
observe them. And when I have this, in my perspective, if I had this more, not aggressive but more determined perspective, it could damage some of this willingness to show me what you think about the soul. So I'm still
Yeah.
observing my surroundings and seeing how can I. Right now, I'm still maybe fighting, like trying to abolish work and trying to. It's like one problem at a time, but we'll get there for sure because.
Yeah, and then it just becomes a question of strategy, the order that you do them in, right? And that's another thing that's just
Yeah.
no one's ever gonna figure. We're
Yeah.
all stumbling through that individually.
Yeah, yeah. And depends really on your course of life, I would assume. Like for now, I have, and I can see this perfectly because for now I have at least maybe three or four big ideas that I want to, big areas that I want to scavenge and like see what's in them and maybe do a book and do like not today. But I know for sure, and my creative process is like almost like getting an email. So what I do is I collect and I don't know, I chase the things I love and I collect them, and then someday there's like things working in my brain and my conscious, and someday I just get like a email like boop, and it's like, okay, I have a page. I do the page and now I understand that I'm doing a work for this. And sometimes obviously it's poked and it's like, okay, maybe you can do a comic. And since I'm doing this about space now, it's like I'm poking this area of interest of mine and to do a comic. But I know that there are at least like four boxes or three boxes that I want to get through, but I know that now it's not the time. And for instance, one of them is the Portugal, and within the identity, the colonialism, which is a big, like our past here is very big and vast. And where do I get all of this interest is because my grandparents went to war and now they're here and they still can tell stories or don't. And it's like you live with these people and then again you have to, at some point you get to this neutral point of like you're just a guy, you were just a guy and you were just in war. And also then you get through society and you see the problems that remain still for from the colonial part on our history, and you see the consequences still to this day. So it's like then you have friends, you want to help them. So it's like all of these things that, like, the thing, like the other box would be like woman, kids, marriage, woman life, identity, like looking into my mom and grandmothers and all of the above, and like looking at myself and just going. And I was talking to three friends of mine yesterday. We were having a beer, and then suddenly it was like, yeah, you know what? And then we had like all of this deep conversation, and I was like, yeah, guys, for me, different perspective. I don't want to say this maybe because I'm a woman. And when you find peers that you can do that, that you can just go ahead and just like, have you thought about this? That's when things like gears start
Mhm.
to to and so yeah, woman being woman, and also colonialism is one of the big ones. But then faith, because I see a lot of things in our society and also in my for now in my family and my friends, and like going through college and seeing, like I had a priest in my class, a priest being a like a colleague of mine. He came from Brazil and he was learning to paint because he already painted, and then to be in the same context as this person looking at paintings of naked women, and he was like his comments, it just drove me crazy because I was like, I didn't know you could still be so conservative nowadays. A bit like
Yeah.
you were saying, like, my guy, can't you see? But then it's like, okay, I have to step back, see this different perspective, and I was still young, and I was like, okay, chill. Let's be a bit more passive. Let's observe and think about it. And so that's what I do. And for now, approaching like one thing at a time, but still working on the background,
So instead
thinking.
of just getting like pissed off about it, like this regressive view, you go, okay, how can I
Uh, sometimes,
sympathetically?
sometimes,
Yeah,
sometimes again, it's just like, oh, come on, va,
yeah, yeah,
one thing at a time. But yeah, most of the time it's a bit more passive towards writing and towards doing these materials, like these objects that last, time objects, because I wanna give chance to every thought I can have, and the thoughts I cannot have. So I have to give a chance to the perspectives of others. And so for that I have to observe. And so it gets through those stages, and then in the end maybe I'll go like, yeah, Jesus. It's like,
yeah.
you know.
I
For
want to
now
pull
there's
up
nothing solid. Go ahead.
because I want to pull up an image and see if you've ever seen it. This is one of my favorite images because it's talking about multiple perspectives and like that you encounter a person like that and think like, oh my God, you're so obviously regressive, but you're still willing to like, you're curious enough to see why he would think that. And I've always thought
Mm.
this is a great graphic to represent like
See,
you you could
this is
have
very good.
political worldviews where people are so convinced they're right, and they are,
Hmm.
like that is a square shadow being
Yeah,
cast.
yeah.
So it's nice to hear that like you're out there operating that way of like I'm probably still gonna agree with you at the end of the day, but like I do want to stand over there and see why you see the world that way
Mm.
is a very, very
It
I
would
wish
be
everyone was doing that.
it would be not ignorant, but it would be, I feel like, a bit, and this is the most smooth, uh dumb, I want to say. It would be a bit dumb of me to, I don't know. Also, it seems like I was saying, no, I am the right one, and I sometimes I'm not right. Sometimes I
Yeah.
just want to ask and get to know a bit better. So for me it takes time, and I feel like things can be changed. So within me, within the person, there are core values that most likely won't change throughout my life, but there are perceptions that maybe I'm not seeing
Hmm.
in the clearest way. Maybe they're distorted, and maybe that distortion, just like the image you just showed, takes time to untangle and deconstruct. So let's give others a choice, and why not? But yeah, this priest in my class, I didn't give I didn't give him a choice. I was like, no, dude, sorry, I will
We
not look at painting.
you need to send him a copy of Grapefruit, and then when you've sold all thousand, we'll get him on the YouTube chat because
See,
his perspective of your book would be well worth having. So
for sure.
in these like boxes that you've got like kind of ethnic and cultural view of identity, a gendered view of identity,
Mm,
um, like definitely for the audience watching, go out and get Grapefruit and Not Today. These are both like if you care about comics as a medium and where it's going and what it could be, you need to own these
mhm.
books. You should. If you want to read about Spider-Man, probably not. There's a
Yeah,
little bit of philosophy.
sorry.
It would make your head hurt. But go by those. And then like for anyone watching, do you have some concrete like these are things to look out for coming forward? Like I'm working on this book about colonialism, or are those still kind of vague ideas at this point?
Okay. No, they're not so vague, but they're not solid enough still to be a book. But I am currently working into different projects, but they're smaller. But they will be out there and still this year, maybe. I
So if
think
people just if people follow
keep
you
an
on
eye out.
Instagram is the best way
Yeah.
to support and see what's coming next.
See, at some point I will do a website, but social media for now is already such a mess and such a full time sometimes. So Instagram for sure is my most eloquent social media, and I will post everything there. That's of your interest and mine as well. So for sure, these will be there in a couple of months. And about the colonialism and like womanhood and everything, it will come in my life. So just just
You've got
sit.
time.
Yeah, I got time. Maybe you got time too. Just sit, have a coffee, and wait for some books, and sounds great for me.
Well, so everybody, please like get your coffee, get your copy of Grapefruit and Not Today, sit down and enjoy them, and then give Anna a follow on Instagram so you can keep up on what she's doing. I definitely am. I'm follow. I don't mean to be creepy, but I'm following you like a hawk because I think your career is good and
Thank
important.
you.
And I really appreciate you take the time. We've gone for quite a while now, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but I feel like I could probably just sit around and BS philosophy with you all day. And I've really enjoyed the conversation, but also like enjoyed and thank you that you're giving me work that's deep and thoughtful and something to chew over because we need more of that. So much appreciated.
Thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you for watching, everyone. We really appreciate your time. We hope we didn't hurt your head too much, and we'll catch you
Yeah.
next time.